It's a slick little camera. This is a 10 megapixel camera. It's crazy. But I have, the camera that I've been using the most in the last few years is a 1DS Mark III. And I just got a Canon EOS 6D. And I really need to have this handy because I don't know what the heck I'm doing with this thing. It's smarter than I am, so I have to keep looking up things and try to trick it. But that's why you have it, because if you're out shooting something and you want to do something new that you haven't done before, you don't know how to do it, you either have to ask someone, hope they know, or you're out of luck unless you have your manual. So I want you to always have your manual. If you've got a camera, you've got a manual. So, which one is XTI? Okay. Then the other thing you need to know is what kind of memory card it uses. My 1DS actually used two different kinds at the same time. Oh, really? Okay. Well, I had two slots. My new 6D, it only has one slot. And that frustrates me a little bit, but I figured out a way around it, which we'll talk about. So, these are SD cards, and most of the cameras, how many of your cameras use an SD card? I'd say practically everybody, right?
I use both.
You use both? Okay.
I use SD or the HC.
Well, these are both SD, and SDHC is just
Well,
it's just a higher quality. It's made
take a
for.
card that my other camera won't take, the big one.
Yeah.
That's compact.
No, some of the new ones will take the SHC card, which is for, especially if you do video, you need a quicker card, it's faster access reading and writing. But some of the old ones won't use those cards. They don't know what to do with it. It's more than they can handle. I found a friend gave me a camera, and I've been messing around with it over the weekend. It's a, shoot, I forget the brand, it's a Camedia. I think this might be a Sony Camedia. And the highest level card it recommends is a 128 megabyte. That's how old it is. It's 10 years old. That's how fast the technology is taking off. The other kind of card is a compact flash, which is a little square card. And it's bigger than the SD cards. And I used to be able to use both of those at the same time around the camera. But we'll talk about this later. The card reader, one of the ways that you can get things to your computer. And then, why did I put that there? Okay. The number of megapixels that your camera can shoot and the size of your memory card will determine how many images you can get. And there's a lot more factors going on than that, so we'll talk about that in a bit. Then what kind of a battery does it use? This little guy uses this funky little proprietary battery that nothing else I have, it won't work with anything else. Just this little battery in here. This is the battery I've got for this, and it will work in 2 or 3 cameras actually we have in the shop, which is unusual. They usually try to rig it so that all of them are different. Now I've got 1, 2, we have maybe 4 or 5 different models, over the years. Some of the old ones we still keep around, but they don't shoot as many megapixels. They're not as sharp or high quality image. And we've got at least 4 different styles of batteries for those cameras. It's just, it can drive you money. I like to encourage people, anybody's camera use AA batteries? Nobody? Okay. These rechargeable batteries are awesome for that. And these are a new style battery. It's a AA battery, and it's rechargeable, but it's called the Max E because it will retain up to 90% of its charge for up to a year. So the others, most rechargeable batteries have what they call a trickle out. as they sit, every day they're trickling out a little bit of the energy. So over the course of a month, they will lose half or more of their energy. So that's not a good thing. So these are made to hold their charge. So you can put them in a drawer, put them in your camera bag, take them with you, and they're a great backup. But if you don't use those kind in your camera, they won't work. These would also work in the flashes. Now, you would not believe. Okay, here we go. I carry not one, but 2 flashes. So how many batteries have I just used? 8. 8 batteries. All right, I have a booster backup battery that I can plug into this thing. How many does it use? 8 more. There's 16 batteries. I also use these digital relays. It's a radio relay. So I can have one on my camera and one on a light across the room, and they can talk to each other. Each one of those uses 2. I have 3 of those, so that's 6 more. You get the idea? I have a lot of batteries. It gets kind of wild and crazy. So something like this is going to save us lots of money over the years. If you were just buying Energy Bunny, batteries, I'd be going through about 100 of those a week. It's just crazy, just crazy. So rechargeables are a really good way to go. Most of these days now, this group, Ansmann, A-N-S-M-A-N-N, those batteries are some of the best on the market, and they don't cost that much. What's going to cost you, this charger will cost you at the front end, but you'll make your money back in the first year just by all the rechargeables. The amount of energy that the batteries will hold has gone up and up. The first set of batteries I had, I think, were like 600 milliamps or 800 milliamps, and now they're up to 2,900 milliamps, which means they store more energy, and for the higher energy, gobbling equipment, those things will work. I can have a set of batteries, and I might be able to use that set in those flashes for a week without having to worry about recharging them. It's good stuff. All right, now we're getting the meat of this stuff. We're going to start talking about your camera settings. These are all the things that I want you to be able to know and understand about your camera that will help you to take better pictures. And we'll go through these one at a time. And this is going to get a little deep, so we'll take our time here because this is really the crux of everything in terms of understanding how to take good pictures. So let's jump right in. ISO is the light sensitivity. And light sensitivity, the old film used to have a rating. It's called the ISO rating. And film, most average daylight film used to be like ISO 100. And then you had the faster films came out, and you had a 200. And then they talked about indoor, film, it was 400 ISO. And what that means is the higher the number, the more sensitive it is to light, which technically would mean you wouldn't need as much light to be able to still get a good picture. It works the same way, even though it's not the sensitivity of film, it's the sensitivity of the sensor in your camera. It works pretty much the same way. The higher the number, let me see what I got. I can't remember what I put in my own stuff here. We're going to the right thing. Okay. So the higher the number, the more sensitive it is. And there's a trade-off in digital that's getting better and better all the time. When they first started with digital sensors, if you went over 200, you would get all kinds of funny little speckly black things in your image. That's called digital noise. And what it is you've got these millions of sensors, okay? If you got a 10 megapixel camera, you got 10 million sensors basically going on there. And all those sensors are trying to read the daylight and give it an electronic number between 0 and 255. And if it can't figure out what the light is, what the level of light is on that subject, For instance, if you're shooting a picture in kind of lower light and shadowy areas, it can't distinguish between light gray and light gray and not so light gray and black, okay? It can't figure out all those things, so it just says anything in that range from light gray to black is black. It just gives it, you know, the number 255. And so that's just a little black square. You get enough of those little black squares in your picture, and it looks like it's got freckles, black freckles. And it doesn't look very good. So now, the cameras now can go way beyond 800 and still not worry about it. They can figure out what shade of gray, you know, it's looking at and give it a decent number. So to get that noise level that kind of interferes with the view of the picture, you know, visually, you might have to go up to 3200 ISO, which means you can take some pretty darn good pictures, even in a room like this. This isn't a lot of light. It seems like it to us, but it's not a lot of light to a camera. But it will take a picture at a higher ISO and still come out fairly decent. So it's kind of interesting what they're doing with the technology. So that's light sensitivity. The second one, and this is where people are going to start glazing over as we start to get into it, is the aperture or the f-stop. This is the size of the opening on the lens, and let's see. Well, let's just jump into it. So we're dealing with the amount of light. Everything in photography has to do with light. The quality of light, the amount of light, the direction of the light. It's all about light. No light, no photo. So either we take natural made light, or we create artificial light, or we go home, don't take a picture. So the size of the opening in your camera lens is the second thing that determines the exposure of your image. What was the first thing we talked about? ISO, all right? ISO is a factor in getting a good exposure. Second one is the f-stop, the size of the opening in the lens. The bigger the opening, the more light. We'll deal with the concept of depth of field later on. Okay, this is what depth of field does. It's what's in focus and what's not in focus, basically. And we'll come back to that later. Shutter speed has to do with an opening that slides across the sensor, and it goes between the aperture and the camera sensor. All right, that's the shutter speed. The speed of that shutter determines how much light gets to the sensor also. So not only do you have the sensitivity of the sensor itself, and you have the opening of the camera lens, and then you've got a shutter going across it at different speeds. And that not only affects the amount of light, but it affects the type of photo that you're going to get. The opening of the aperture affects it, and the speed of the shutter affects the kind of pictures you're going to get. In this case, a fast shutter speed will stop action. So you can take a picture of water rushing down a stream and stop it. But if you shoot a slow shutter speed, then you're going to get some blurred action, and it's going to be more artsy, ethereal type of picture. That's where you see waterfalls that looks like they're just kind of one big soft stream. So there's different effects that you get based on that. So let me back up for a second and go back to this now. We're talking about the aperture, and the effects that you get from it have to do with depth of field. And that is what's in focus and what's not. And the difference is trying to control your depth of field to take a better quality picture. In this case, the flowers are the main subject. We don't care about all the other stuff, but you can sort of semi-see other flowers back there and so on. But if you change your depth of field, you can totally make those go away. And that's all we've done in this, from one picture to the other, just change the depth of field. Well, that's not everything we did, I take that back.
So on the picture before, what aperture would you use?
On this one,
Yeah,
that's probably, let's say that's an F8.
okay, so that would be the smaller one,
F8,
would be the smaller one.
yes. Which, the smaller the opening, the more depth of field. Okay? We'll go over this again and again and again because it takes a while for it all to sink in. It gets even crazier in a minute. But the smaller, the more depth of field. The more open, the less depth of field. So, to go from this, say that's F8, to this, is probably F4, or F2.8 maybe. You notice that there's only one of those four flowers that's really in focus. And if we look really close, it may only be a part of that one flower that's in focus. So you kind of have to pick and choose what you want to be in focus if you've got a depth of field issue, okay? So, based on what you see there, which flower is the focus of that picture? The one at the top, the biggest one, the one that's in focus, okay? So we could, if we wanted to, just for grins and giggles, we could make the one on the left or on the right at the back, put it in focus. And if we do that, the ones in front are all going to be out of focus. Now it's going to look funny because it's only really the one that we have in focus now that's really facing at you, that you can see all of the detail of it. So it's a pick and choose when you're doing this to know what's going to be in focus and why. Okay. Now, let's go on through this and then we'll go back to those three things. So far we've talked about ISO and aperture and shutter speed. Those three things control the exposure of your picture. And they work interchangeably with each other, and that's what gets really tricky about this. But we're going to move on to this because this has to do with your camera and your memory and everything. The image quality settings. You have options with your camera in terms of how many pixels you're going to save. If you're shooting just JPEG, I shoot what's called RAW, which means I keep everything that the camera sees. And then I mess with it later on. I can do all kinds of control things with it, with software. And then I can process out and make JPEGs later. But just know that your camera says it takes in 10 million pixels when you shoot an image. But the minute you save it to a JPEG, it doesn't keep all of those 10 million pixels. It throws some of them away. And what we're talking about here is how many of them are we going to throw away. Okay? So you have the ability, this one shows 5 different levels of pixels it can save as JPEGs. And my recommendation is save as many as you can. If you run out of, if your memory card isn't big enough to handle it, you only save, like I was looking at, remember I told you about the camera that only has a 128 meg memory card for it? Well, it was talking about that camera actually can shoot RAW. I don't know why. But if you shoot RAW with that camera, and you have that 128 meg, which is the largest memory card it can handle, you're going to get about a dozen images and you're done. That's it. And I'm like, what? And also it has the ability, I don't know if you understand, there's JPEG is a format, a digital format. There's also TIFF. And a TIFF format is like RAW, and it saves everything. It saves all the layers and all the colors and all the pixels. And it actually takes up more space than a RAW file does. So if you wanted to save it as a TIFF file, which that camera will let you do, you get about 4 TIFF files on there. And then you got to change the cards. I'm like, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. It just boggles my mind. But, the average card today, you can buy 8 megapixel or 8 gig memory cards and 16 gig memory cards for, if you watch, you get them on sale for $20 or less. So that gives you a lot of space to store stuff on. And what I recommend is, spend the time and watch for the sales, get those card. Now, not all cards are the same, so every 16 megapixel or card is not equal to each other. They're different qualities, there's different speeds. That's why when you're talking about the HC card versus the other regular cards, an HC card is made to handle video better than the older SD cards. The electronics in it are such that it reads faster, it saves faster. So it's better equipped to handle video in these new cameras now. So just kind of keep an eye. That's why I wanted you to know what your manuals say will work in yours, because some of them will say one thing and you go buy something and say, oh, it doesn't work, and I don't understand why. Well, it wasn't made to work with your camera. SDHC. The HC, I forget what it stands for, but I think it's, I mean, as simple as like higher quality. It's just a faster. Well, that's if your camera will take video, you can use an HC card. It's not necessarily, if you don't shoot video, you may not be able to use that in your camera. It has something to do with the speed, and it's adapted for video primarily. No, I think that's just a little quicker card. It's really tough, and some of the information on the internet will drive you crazy trying to understand it. I do know that, I'm trying to think where it was I just got. I think I bought, at Christmas time, that Walmart had a sale on, what do I have on my camera?
16
It was it's not Lexar. SanDisk, yes, there you go. That's exactly it, yes. They had an awesome deal. It was like, gosh, I don't know, 60% off or something like that. And it was 16 megapixels. And it was, I would call it kind of the middle of the road in terms of quality. Not the low end, but not the high end, but really good. And for any of your cameras, it would work great. So that SanDisk SD card is a really good card. So be looking for that. So your camera by default, I don't know where it'll be set, from the factory. It's not set on the largest usually. Some of them I've discovered, a couple of them had set on largest, but it's not normal. But I recommend having it set for large, as large an image as you can save in terms of quality. Okay? All right, quality is different from compression. Compression has to do with when it goes to save it. All right, you've made one choice already. You want to save as many pixels as you can. So you save the largest number of pixels you can. Well, there's a second option here that they work hand in hand, and it has to do with compression. And it's how compact are you going to make it so that you can have lots of space on your memory card. And some people go ahead and make the compression as much as they can. And what that does is every time you make a decision, large, medium, or small quality, normal, fine, or super fine, you see the little symbols beside it, normals, fine, and super fine? That has to do with the amount of pixels it's saving. Again, so your image quality saves a certain percentage of pixels, and your compression saves a certain percentage. So you want as little compression as possible, which means you're going to save as many of those things as you can. And the highest quality, which saves as many pixels as you can. The difference being, in this situation, a superfine and large may only throw away about 20% of your pixels, whereas on the bottom end, normal and small may throw away as many as 60% of your pixels. What it's doing is playing this little Russian roulette game. It says, I can remember what those pixels represent, okay? And it tries to recreate that later on when you call that image up. And it can only do so well. It never is the same. So if you were to, had two people save the same image, one saved at the highest quality, least compression, lowest quality, most compression, they won't look the same if you put them on the same monitor. They just won't look the same. And that shows up. And some people think, that's okay, I don't care. But I care. You know, in my business, I have to care. And most people, I think, are getting to the point now where they can see the difference in those things. And it does make a difference.
So what you're saying is when you shoot it super fine, you get less pictures but better quality.
Exactly.
So you can do more with it
Yes,
later.
exactly. Good point. That's exactly the point. You can do more with it later. You can always throw things away, but if you ain't got them, you can't throw them away.
Right.
And you can't recreate them.
So is, like on this camera, I don't know, like it'll have an L and then it has like a full. Is that what you're color? And then the other one is the lower quality of that one?
Okay, yes, that's stepping down. So you have large, a little, not quite as large, medium, not quite as medium. All right, so each one of those is stepping down.
Okay, so that one that's got like the three little bars was for normal.
Well, this is your compression. You're looking at quality right there. Okay, your quality, you're looking at this.
Okay.
See how I have M1, M2, and M3?
Uh-huh.
You have basically L1, L2, M1,
So
M2.
large is what it said on right now?
Yes,
Okay.
which is good.
Okay.
All right, does that make sense? That, I mean, it's a lot of stuff, but they're interrelated, and it all has to do with how many pixels we're keeping and how many are going to throw away. And it all has to do with what you can do with it later down the road. You know, if you're just going to look at it on your computer all day, any of them would work. You know, even the smallest ones would work fine. Because these aren't made to run, you know, super high quality, although they're getting to be more and more, you know, pixels on these things, so you need a little bit more to drive them and really look good, but still, it's kind of the bottom of the chain. So this is just some ideas of data sizes. Notice the numbers, you know, for large, super fine versus the bottom. Oh, that's tremendous. That's crazy. I didn't realize how big those numbers change. But look at this number right here. So that's small in terms of the quality, and it's the normal, which is the smaller, the most amount of compression. So we threw away, in terms of quality, we threw away a bunch, and in terms of compression, we mashed some more out of it. So we have 84 kilobytes versus 3,400 kilobytes if we do it the way I'm recommending it. All right, so do you think this image can remember those other, you know, 3,000 pixels and all the shades, 256 different shades in each one of them? No. So there's going to be some real noticeable quality problems if you don't save some more of those pixels. Is that all sinking in? You get the feel for what we're talking about here? Keep them as much as you can. So I always go for the best and as much as we can. Your books will have information there about that, but you know, it just keeps on going. Now, you know, you would start to worry, but see, we're dealing with cards that are at 8, 16, or 32 gigabytes now. So, you know, you're still going to be able, with a 22 megapixel JPEG, you can still get, that says 2,000 images on your card. I don't know about that, but you can get a lot of images on there, okay? I have a 16 meg card in my camera, and I'm shooting raw images, which is can't remember, 18 megapixel image. And I can get like 300 images on there. That's all I care to deal with in a day. If I fill that card, I got a lot of work ahead of me when I go back to the office. So I don't see any big problem. That's shooting raw. So just shooting JPEG, you can probably triple that. So I think we're in pretty good shape today with the cards that they make available to us and so on. Another thing that's in your manual and on your camera, a setting, is the white balance. And basically, every light situation has what they call a certain color temperature to it. And those are degrees Kelvin. So like on a nice sunny day outside, there's, no clouds, just the sun and blue sky. That is about 55 to 6,500 degrees Kelvin in terms of color temperature. But on a cloudy day like today, it's more like about 3,200 degrees Kelvin. And it has a blue cast to it. Early in the morning and late in the afternoon, sunset, those are really super warm and orangey yellow. That's kind of up in the 7,000, 8,000, Kelvin temperature. Orange versus overcast, this is kind of a blue-gray. Now, when I shoot raw, I can adjust all that stuff. And I can fix it to make it look like anything I want to. So I take a cloudy day like this and make it look warm, like it was a nice sunny day, even though you don't see the sun. But I can make the colors of everything in it look warm and pleasing. With the JPEG, you can only do so much. You don't have the range of latitude to fix things that you do with a raw image. That's one of the reasons we shoot raw all the time. Because in our business, we got to be able to have, my whole thing about photography and shooting is the more control you got, the better. So in RAW, we have a lot of control over what we can do with it after we've actually taken the picture. We still want to take the best picture we can in terms of exposure and framing and action and facial expressions and all that, and sharpness. I know they made some new cameras now that supposedly can make a unsharp picture sharp, but that's not my style. I want to make it sharp the first time, and then I can do all this other stuff with color and everything else later on. So most of your cameras will you set it on auto and you're good to go. And the electronics that are building these cameras now, for most of you, there's no reason to do otherwise, I don't think. Auto's great. If you want to start playing and getting really artistic with it and, having fun with it, then you can start going all these other modes. And if you set it, here's what happens. If I take a picture outside in RAW, when I go back to my office, I'm gonna change it and fix it. If you take your camera outside, instead of putting it on auto, you put it on a cloudy day, it's going to do it for you. It's going to do the same thing I'm doing in the office. It's going to do it on the camera when you take the picture. That's the only difference, is whether you want the camera to do it for you or if you want to do it later yourself. But when you shoot JPEG, you can't do it so well after the fact. So you're better, if you're going to just shoot JPEGs, then set those cameras, according to the kind of daylight you got, and you get these really nice looking, pictures that are pleasing to look at. It doesn't look gray and dingy. It looks, warm and inviting. It's like, wow, I took a good picture. So most of you, I would say, is keep it on auto. And then the last thing we've got to deal with is color space. Now on the cameras, let's see. Let's do this way.
Hold on a minute.
Okay, let's go here first. The horseshoe shape in the background is basically the visual spectrum, what humans can see. The triangles represent different color spaces that they have mathematically created for cameras. And the smallest triangle there, called the sRGB triangle, is the visual spectrum that any of your monitors will see. That's all the color can pick up. So if you notice the difference between that one and the other two triangles, the largest one, the Pro Photo triangle, it actually shows picking up color that's outside the visual spectrum. Now I can't prove that. I don't know how to prove it. That's what they tell me, but the point is it picks up more shades of the three basic colors and the other color spaces. And the second one, sRGB, the next one is Adobe RGB, that makes any difference to us. That is basically the Adobe RGB color space is the color space that most things are printed in terms of color printing. So what that means is, if you were to shoot in the sRG mode, which is mostly the default in your cameras, then if you went to print something in a 4-color printing press, you're not going to have as many shades available to print as they can print. So technically, to your visible eye, you may or may not see the difference in the number of shades and the variations in color. If you were to put them up next to each other, you probably can. It's a difference in terms of the saturation of a given color, saturation of your reds and blues, sometimes green. Green is not as easy to see sometimes as the red and blue and shades of red and blue, but it can be significant. So what I recommend usually is that again, if you have it, if I'm in the pro photo space, I can go down to Adobe or down to sRGB, but I can't go up. Okay? So I recommend change the setting from sRGB in your cameras to Adobe. And usually you don't have Pro as something that's available. Pro is more along the range of the RAW. Okay?
So if we set it to raw, I don't have movie, but I have raw.
If you set it to RAW, it's a whole nother realm. We can talk about that later, but it's a whole nother realm of processing. Because you don't, with a raw image, you don't just take a raw image and print it. You can't do that. You have to take a raw image and process it and export out a JPEG. You have to create a JPEG from the raw file. Now the cool thing about RAWs is you're never going to print, or you're never going to save over it. You can't save